She'd always kind of, in her own soft spoken way, would just say to me, as she did this time in Spanish, Mijo, agarra el toro por los cuernos. Son, you got to grab the bull by the horn. Welcome back to the Bridging the Divide podcast. I'm your host, Rolando Bonilla. Good to see everyone again. You know, one of the things I often get asked about as we are talking about bridging the divide is how do you handle failure? And as I get to meet a lot of you along the way, the theme that keeps popping up over and over and over again is what do I do when I fail? How do I manage that? So I figured I'd take you on a little bit of a failure memory lane for me. The things that I've had to kind of overcome to get to this point, but also help you really get to that realization that you're gonna fail. There's just no way around it. If any of you have listened to the show in the past, you'll know that this is a big theme for me. That failure is inevitable. It is also necessary as part of your growth. It is literally the name of the game. And as I've said from the very beginning, from a bigger perspective, bridging the divide, although, yes, there are clearly political issues we're living in right now and, historical issues, I want to make it so that you bridge the divide within yourself first, so that you put yourself on that path where you're competing. I used to like to tell folks often, don't complain about field conditions when you're still in the parking lot. Let's get to the field first. Let's make the assessments there. So this is really about that, how to help you close that divide within yourself to actually give you the space to get on the field and compete. And then at that point, we can really assess collectively together how we're going to bridge the overall historical divide, economic divide that has left so many behind in this country. So I'll start with myself. One of the first moments that I recall was I was about 17 years old. I had been a part of the mayor of San Francisco's gang outreach program. I had gotten a summer job through a program, a nonprofit, local nonprofit called Horizons Unlimited. My job was to work for the director of public health in San Francisco. Fast forward, I do the internship that ended up changing my life and actually became a job that changed my life, that gave me opportunities, and in many ways made me who I am today. I was afraid of taking that job. I was afraid of taking that program, being a part of that program. And I remember after that successful completion of that program, I was invited to come back and be a keynote speaker at San Francisco State University, where the program was having its annual year end celebration. We were expecting about 200 people, and I was losing my mind. I said yes to the opportunity, but I was freaked out. I'd never spoken to a crowd that big. I'd never spoken to a crowd in that type of setting, let alone the keynote speaker. I was inexperienced, but experienced enough to know that I was the speaker that day. And I remember being in my grandmother's kitchen, writing out my speech, but vacillating too, like a lot of you in business, right? You're thinking about these plans, you're excited about them, but you're freaked out, right? You're freaked out. You're thinking to yourself, well, what if it doesn't work out? Yeah, maybe I should just go do something else that's safer, that doesn't push me out of my comfort zone. Maybe this idea is too much for me. Well, that was me. Maybe this speech is too much for me. I'm not ready. And I make the mistake of saying out loud to my grandmother, so, Grandma, I'm not doing this speech. I'm going to call them and tell them I'm not going to be in town. And see, my grandmother was not one of those people who would yell at me. She wouldn't, put her finger in my face and tell me what was wrong. Quite the opposite. She'd always kind of, in her own soft spoken way, would just say to me, as she did this time in Spanish, Mijo, agarra el toro por los cuernos. Son, you got to grab the bull by the horns. And then in that same quiet voice, she looks me in the eyes and she says, you're doing this. You're not going to disappoint me. My grandson's not a quitter. And I remember when she said that to me, I remember thinking, oh God, I absolutely cannot get out of this. But it was at that moment that I realized that I was going to do this whether I liked it or not. And so then what I did is I called the program and I said, I'm not giving this speech unless I have a podium. And I'm going to be honest with you, that podium was not to look presidential. That podium was not for anything other than something for me to hold and hide behind. And they were kind enough to provide that to me. And long story short, I do the speech. And as I would say to my grandmother until the end of her life, Grandma, you created a monster. Because that day I was failing myself. I was failing myself because I was afraid of the moment. I was inexperienced in the moment. And I said to myself, wait a minute, maybe it would be best if I walked away and just didn't do it. Had I not done that, I wouldn't be here right now. I wouldn't have actually pursued that path, and I wouldn't have realized how much I enjoy public speaking, how much I enjoy communications as a craft. That never would have evolved had I not faced my fear that day. Another time I had failure was in 2004. I had run for the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. I was a hot shot city commissioner at 23. I was on the Juvenile Probation Commission in San Francisco, responsible for overseeing the juvenile probation system in the city and county of San Francisco. I was one of the youngest. I was 23. I had overcome. September 11th happened when I was in office, and some really serious conversations and some serious growth. And then it was time in my mind. I thought I was ready to run for the Board of Supervisors, and I did not win. And I sat there at home, and I remember thinking, now what? I had this plan. I was on my way, and the plan didn't work out. And then, like many folks, again, in business, when you fail, well, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I should just completely leave the space that I'm in. And in fact, I ended up doing the opposite. I did have those thoughts, but then I realized I'm going to push, 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 and continue to stay in government in some way because that was my passion, still is. And I couldn't get a job because my loss was very public. I was very radioactive at the time. If I told you the names of the folks who I reached out to for work, it would be a who's who. But I realized I was at that point smart enough. I was 26 at that point, smart enough to know that opportunities weren't coming and why. People were still gracious with their time, but as far as me getting back into the game, I kind of had this conclusion that it was going to be a long, hard road if I wanted it. And then came the other issue of, oh God, I need income and I don't have any income. What am I going to do? And here's what I did. I ended up getting a job at Best Buy. I was a customer service rep at Best Buy. It's probably one of the better customer service reps at Best Buy, given my political experience at 26 years of age. And I remember sometimes people would recognize me when they would go to Best Buy. They were a little confused, right? Because not too long before I was, in the papers in San Francisco, some good, some bad, but I was in the papers. I was on television doing interviews, and now I was a customer service rep at Best Buy. And I remember a mentor of mine saying to me how proud she was because I was continuing my path forward. I wasn't stopping. But I remember saying to myself, I'm doing this as a way to get back to where I wanted to go. Shout out to Best Buy. Thanks for the opportunity. I needed the income, but it also gave me the space to really reassess my life. And I came to the conclusion that if no one was going to hire me, I was going to hire myself. And so at that time, I then went and applied for my real estate license, took classes at City College of San Francisco. Shout out to City College of San Francisco for literally always having whatever I needed when I needed it in my life. I got my real estate license at City College of San Francisco. And then I went off to become a realtor. and I loved it. Again, I didn't realize how much I would love it. I jumped into it out of necessity, but I loved it. I remember in class they would tell us every night we were in there. On average, it'll take you about a year to get your first deal. I loved it so much. I got about 4 to 6 deals that first year. I was everywhere rather than making myself, market niche to San Francisco. I went wherever people went. I talked to people. I went to events. I shook hands. I gave out business cards. I followed up. And little by little, I was building my practice, my real estate practice, and the skill set. Again, I hired myself. And why am I telling you this story? Because very often in business, people don't want to hire you and people don't want to work with you. And as I've said on this show many a times, that doesn't mean that it's because of you. It could be a series of reasons why that doesn't work out. Today's show is about keeping your head right and focusing on your goal and focusing on how it is you're going to get there and realizing that you're never going to go on a straight path. When that straight path is there, ride that straight path as long as you can, but deep down inside, know that at some point that straight path is going to end. And why is it important for you to keep that in mind? Because this is where it gets hard for a lot of you, where you the moment that straight path ends, then you get into these emotional doldrums of, oh no, this is not for me, or oh no, I don't think I'm ready for it, oh no, people don't like me. When on the other hand, if you look at that as more of a challenge and an acceptance that, sometimes you'll go in a straight line, sometimes you're going to dip down, sometimes you're going to go up, then that's going to make the process more enjoyable for you, both emotionally and tangibly too, because you're more prone to have success if you have a positive attitude about these things. But I go to Best Buy, do my time there, get my license, build my practice. And then before I knew it, I was working my way into San Jose City Hall. Got an opportunity I couldn't resist, built the brand for myself. That led to the formation of my company in 2010. But guess what? 2015, that company didn't really work out. There were internal changes that happened, and instead, what I did was I bought out my business partner, and he went on his way to do great things. I went on my way to continue building what I'm building. So that's it, right? Like, and I can keep going and going and going about failure. It's normal. It's necessary. It's critical. 22, June of 2022. But you've heard me talk about this example a lot, and I like talking about the election examples because their failure, their rejection, um, but at the same time they're not right. I'm reminded of that quote by Giannis. Forgive me, I can't pronounce his last name right now, but the superstar NBA player for the Milwaukee Bucks, when he was asked about whether he had failed or his team had failed, and his response to the reporter was, "You work every single day. Do you fail? Are you failing when you are able to provide for your family? Are you failing just because you're not getting the outcome that you want?" And the answer was no. And he was very clear about that. And then I love that quote. If you have time, look it up. Look up that interaction, because he was right. Just because you don't get the outcome you want right away doesn't mean you're failing. Doesn't mean you have to throw your hands up in the air and say, "This is it for me." Quite the opposite. You throw your hands up in the air and you say, "Okay, what are the data points I can take from this? What are the assessments I can take from this? And where do I adjust? How do I adjust? What's it going to take for me to adjust?" And very often, it's that inability to ask those questions of yourself and instead go straight into the doom and gloom, go straight into doubting yourself, go straight into believing that this isn't for you, that makes it so that many of you aren't actually bridging your own internal divide and getting closer to your goal. Because if you actually took the time to assess what's not working, you'll realize that very often what's not working is completely under your control. That very often the things that you think are out of your control are under your control. I can tell you, I've been in business formally for 15 years. And I can tell you that my schedule is insane. But then I'll run into some folks whose businesses, they've been in business for a year or two, and they're wondering why they don't have client flow, why they don't have that pipeline. And then I look at their schedule and I say, oh, hey, wait a minute. You seem to have a lot of open time. When is your time to develop relationships, build on the ones you have? When are you spending time developing your product? And I get this look of, oh, I'm like, well, there it is, right? I mean, if you're not investing the time to meet people, to talk to people, to develop things, to make things better, then how are you expecting to get results, right? These things don't just fly down from the sky like rain. You actually have to make the investment to build it out. So very often, the biggest, I would say, the biggest roadblock for many out there is that this realization that, and part of it is the culture we live in today, right? Every time I look on social media, this is a good example. I even thought about whether or not I should do this podcast in the first place. And one of the reasons is there's a saturation, an oversaturation of content on social media, on YouTube, talking about business and how you can do it and how everything is possible. And it all feels really glamorous, but the reality of it is, and then you have the other side of it, which is, oh my God, it's painful. It is. It feels impossible. No, that part's true. Or it feels like you're jumping out of an airplane, building a parachute at the same time. Yeah, that part's also true. But the reality is, it's a little bit of everything. It's a little bit of everything. Everyone's experience is different. But what I can tell you is that everyone's experience to be successful is the same. That one, in my mind, and what I have seen in my experience, is non-negotiable. Whether I'm working with someone who is at the multi-million-dollar level, publicly traded company, starting from the bottom, the consistent thread that I have seen has been a very structured life. And by structure, I mean from the moment they wake up until they go to sleep, they have attack plans for that day. If you're not waking up with attack plans, the likelihood of real failure is higher. On the other hand, if you have an attack plan and you attack it every day and things don't work out, well, then you at least have the ability to assess data points for that day so that you can then incorporate that information into the next. But if you're waking up in the morning and you're watching the YouTube videos and you're just watching me, for example, or you're reading books about this stuff, and whether it's one extreme or the other, and then your schedule is empty, or you're in the what I call the forever research stage, then yeah, it's gonna feel much more like failure because you're absolutely not gonna see that growth. Because at some point, right? At some point, you got to get out of that locker room, you got to walk out of that tunnel, and you got to hit the field, and you're either gonna win or you're gonna lose. That part has to happen. So to me, failure is a mental roadblock, but at the same time, it's very preventable because I like to bifurcate this. There's failure with knowledge gain, which is what happens when you really truly take the time to respect what you're doing by developing those battle plans for your day, by developing those strategic plans for the company, whether they be quarterly, yearly, whatever you decide. If you're not working towards that internal constitution, then your failure is going to look very different. Your failure is going to look very disorganized. Your failure is going to look very confused. You're going to be the guy or gal that's running around saying, I'm going to own a business. And on Monday, your business is going to be in tech. On Tuesday, your business is going to be in AI, which is the same thing, right? Tech. On Wednesday, your business is going to be sports marketing. Those folks, right off the bat, when I run into them, I know that there are no battle plans. There's no strategic plan. There's no answer to the question, what problem am I solving and now selling? There's more of I'm trying to do what's cool. I'm trying to do what feels, appropriate, that will make me a lot of money. That's not how this works. That's not how this works. For as much as we glorify certain industries and everyone thinks that the idea of getting rich overnight is possible, I'm sure it is. For the vast majority of people, that's not the case. For the vast majority of us, we're going to have to start from the bottom at zero. For the vast majority of us, it's going to be the bootstrapped customer by customer approach. or a hybrid, which was the approach I took, or it'll be the hybrid customer, some family and friend investment to get me going. But the reality of it is, if you don't uh, have plans, strategic, detailed plans for your company, for your idea, then you will run into real failure. But that could have been prevented, right? That could have been avoided. You could have avoided that simply by sitting down and actually respecting your craft enough to have battle plans and move forward. Um, sometimes it's not, what you want it to be. Sometimes it feels like it's a calamity of enormous proportions, right? I remember when I lost in 2004 versus when I lost in 2022, two different views of the world, right? '04, oh my God, what does this mean? My life is over. But I knew I had to move forward. I didn't come from money. I knew how to move forward and figure it out. 2022, my outlook was okay, not the outcome I wanted. But here were the questions I did ask myself. Did I give this everything I had? The answer was yes. Okay. What could I learn from this? I made the assessments, immediately started incorporating some of that. And then I asked myself, when I closed this door, which I did by the next day, will I be able to comfortably close this door knowing I never have to open it again because I left it out on the field? And the answer was yes. And instead, that moment, and why I talk about it, right? I talk about it because it's a very public loss, but I also talk about it because I learned so much from it. It made me so much better. It helped me with business. It helped me personally, although not the outcome, big picture from a winning the overall life war here. It helped me. It elevated me. It advanced me. So keep that in mind, right? That if you do things right and not necessarily get the result that you want, uh, there's still a lot you could take from it. And if you take a lot from it and then apply it to the pivot, then at that point you're going to be exponentially better because you did not allow yourself the space to do something half-assed, right? Had I run that campaign half-assed, well, I'll raise a couple of bucks here and there. I'll knock on some doors when the temperature's right. I'll go out and give some speeches because that makes me feel good. My assessment of the end of that election would have been not helpful at all. Why? Because I didn't give it my all. I didn't, you know, have the opportunity to develop actual strategies that I can now extract and implement in other parts of my life. It would have been wasted time, wasted energy, because ultimately I did not respect what I was doing enough to give it the time that it merited. Therefore, I did fail, but I chose to fail, which is what very often happens out there. What you perceive as failure and oh my goodness is so difficult really is you failing because you have not invested the necessary time, energy, thoughtfulness behind your idea to give it the space to flourish and become something. In fact, very often you've been fear led, and that fear has not allowed for you to really respect your craft, respect your idea enough to get something out of it and make it better. That's why you hear the concept of falling forward sometimes. Well, and my interpretation of that is that if you do things right, even if they don't work out for you, you are still moving forward because you are learning how to do things that you can now apply to other parts of your life. But if you do things half-assed, there's nothing to apply to your life. And in fact, you're only cementing the bad practice of doing things half-assed. So then you're surprised about bad results when in reality, the only failure is you for not acknowledging that you have to give things your all. Whether you have 8 hours, whether you have 2 hours, if you're not investing the very best of you in those times, then yes, that is real failure. But it's failure because you chose to fail and not failure because of the inevitabilities that happen even when you try your best. Look, we're going to have a Super Bowl this year. We're going to have a World Series. We're going to have an NBA Finals. We're going to have a World Cup next year. At the end of these tournaments, you're going to have a winner and you're going to have a loser. But fundamentally, for the team that lost, they were the final two of everything. So that team was not a failure, right? That team was the second best team of all the available teams because they did everything right. And that day, for whatever reason, things didn't work out. That's where you need to be. You need to be on that path, or you're part of the final two. And regardless of the outcome, you're in a strong position because you did everything right. Because the concept of doing everything right is a habit you want to develop and keep for the rest of your life, because that is going to be the real determiner as to whether or not you're going to succeed or whether you will fail, truly fail. So that's what I got for you all today. Look forward to seeing you again soon, and have a great day, everyone.